to the Seminole County Board of County Commissioners meeting. The time is approximately 9:30. The date is Tuesday, January 11th, 2022. Would like to ask everyone to put their cell phones and/or electronic devices on silent and adhere to social distancing and/or face covering requirements. Thank you. For the opening ceremonies, we'll have the invocation done by Pastor Franklin of the Safe Harbor Christian Church, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Herr. May all rise, please. Pastor.
Dear gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this day, and thank you for us being able to come here to take care of the people of Seminole County. I ask, Father, that you give everyone here wisdom, guidance as they make decisions that is in the best interest of the residents. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Because of those who serve and have served that we get to say, I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Pastor Franklin. Thank you, Commissioner Herr. We'll now move on to proclamation awards and presentation. We first have the business spotlight. We'll hear from staff. To tee this up.
How are we doing the business spotlight? The name of our business is Fermitron Inc. We're an electronics engineering and electronics manufacturing company. We design custom circuit boards, embedded systems, and we also design the firmware that runs on them. We're also a manufacturer of these devices. The circuit boards and the assemblies, they're used in various pieces of equipment, so they're mostly used in industrial or military-based applications, test equipment, and things of that nature. So at this station, we have one of our team members, electronics engineer, working on a circuit design. He's involved with the printed circuit board layout, the schematic capture of the unit. In this instance here, he's inspecting the work that he already completed, looking at the placement of the components and inspecting them and making sure this will produce manufacturable circuit board. We take a concept and bring it from either a concept or something a client already had begun on their end, and we bring it through the point of laying out a printed circuit board and then manufacturing that printed circuit board. Fermitron currently has 6 employees outside of myself, so 7 employees total. We have electrical engineers, embedded firmware engineers, where their primary competency is programming, embedded electronics with the smarts that make them do the wonderful things that they do in the end products, electronic technicians that assemble the circuit boards, inspect the circuit boards, test the circuit boards to ensure that they're working within their established parameters. Fermitron is unique in the fashion that we offer both electronics engineering services and the manufacturing services. A lot of our clients find it attractive to smoothly transition from engineering to manufacturing. The next process that Terry's working on here, after setting up the feeders, we now move on to a dry run where the machine is going to the actual locations and simulating it's going through its actual production run. Seminole County is a perfect place for us to establish our business. We have the high-tech corridor that spans from the west coast of Florida to the east coast of Florida. So this is the warehouse area of the building. This is one of the things that attracted us to this particular site. We looked in places from Lake Mary all the way down to Kissimmee for a location that was the right size for our growing company. And this was perfect because it had a proportional mix of office space to warehouse space. The future for Fermitron Inc. is continued growth and providing the services that our customers and potential clients expect in the areas of electronics engineering and manufacturing.
Thank you. Staff?
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Irma Stengman with Economic Development. And I'd like to introduce the President and CEO of Fermitron, Gilbert Cantev.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Guilford Cantev. I'm the President and CEO of Fermitron, Inc. And I'm a proud Marine Corps veteran, serving active duty from 97 to 2002. We've been located here in Seminole County since November 30th of 2020. Just like the video indicated, we were attracted here due to the large manufacturing base that's here. And we saw ourselves as relocating here because this seemed to be a good veteran-friendly and manufacturing-friendly county. So we've been doing pretty well. Everyone's had their ups and downs with COVID-19. A lot of businesses have been affected, but we're still here. We've pivoted, and we're still actively serving our clients. And just wanted to thank the county commissioners for doing a great job and providing a business-friendly atmosphere here in Seminole County.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for your service as a military Marine. That is a debt we can never repay, but thank you for that. And also thank you for bringing your business here to Seminole County. It's great to see an opportunity that you're providing to us, and why don't you say thank you. Any comments from the board? Commissioner Zimbabwe.
Just a question. Thank you, and thank you, and I'm really impressed that you kicked your business off here while the pandemic was actually underway. So bravo on that. What technologies does your company mainly service? Is it Department of Defense type stuff, or is it aerospace, or is it just whoever the clients want to be or can fill the niche? I'm just curious.
It's basically across the board. We've served industrial, medical. We're prime contractors on a few military contracts at this time, but we also serve standard companies that are just electronic manufacturers themselves and need our support in either design or manufacturing.
Great. Good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner Constantine?
No, I just wanted to say congratulations.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lockhart?
Just wondering, we keep hearing about supply chain, and I'm wondering how many of your products and the items that you need to make what you make, are you finding those easier to find now? Is it still a struggle? How is that working?
It's definitely still a struggle for our clients. Our clients seek us out. Their productions have stopped because they have supply chain issues. We've been able to take some of their products and make some adjustments to the circuitry and swap out and substitute some of those problem components with ones that are available now. So they end up with something that they can still manufacture. It's just a different revision.
Got it. So if there are companies in this country that are looking for someone domestic, stateside, to help fill that need, that component they may not be able to get anymore from overseas, they can contact you how?
They can reach us through our website at www.fermitron.com. We're also easy to find using local references.
Great, fantastic. Thank you for being here.
Commissioner
Thank you.
So we are delighted to have you here and can't believe that I haven't met you yet. So I want to throw out a few networking opportunities for you because we want you back when you're at 100 employees to celebrate that. Private Business Association of Seminole is a very small organization that has business owners just like yourself that come together once a month. Good programming, great opportunity to figure out what's happening in the community. And I just throw that out there as an opportunity. If there's anything my office can do to help you connect, we'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank
I'll
you for your
definitely reach
service
out.
as well.
And
Thank
the
you.
program this month includes...
Let's Put a commissioner on the spot.
The program this month does include me, but I'm one of 4. I actually have a real job as well, so knowledge
gonna be a great program,
knowledge base
great
outside
program.
of this operation. But yeah, it's pretty cool. It's not time-consuming either, and we're not going to ask you for money, much.
And the breakfasts aren't bad.
Breakfast is
Okay, let's try to stay on time here. So thank you very much for your input. It's great having a firm like yours here in Seminole County, so welcome.
Thank you, Commissioners.
And thank you, staff, for bringing us. Next, we'll move to our resolutions. I'd like to ask Commissioner Lockhart to present it, please.
Sure. Commissioners, it is truly my honor to present this resolution recognizing Cecilia Monti, Financial Manager with the Business Office Division, Department of Environmental Services, for 17 years of service to Seminole County government and its citizens. Whereas Cecilia Monti began her career as a budget clerk in the Office of Management and Budget and quickly progressed to budget analyst. And whereas, with those skills, Cecilia Monti left the county to become the Assistant Budget Director for Volusia County Government, where she served for the next 12 years. And whereas, in 2007, Cecilia Monti returned to Seminole County as the Revenue Administrator in the Budget and Fiscal Management Division. And whereas, while there, she was influential in implementing the first telecommunications public service tax as a new source of revenue for the county. And whereas, in 2019, Cecilia Monti was hired as the Financial Manager for the Environmental Services Department and has continued to use her extensive knowledge of Florida local government statutes, budget procedures, and generally accepted accounting principles. And whereas Cecilia Monti will officially retire January 14th, 2022, after 17 years of employment with Seminole County. And whereas Cecilia Monti's outstanding work ethic and dedication to county operations made her an exemplary employee and teammate. In addition, her friendly demeanor and ready smile made her a joy to work with. And whereas the Board of County Commissioners of Seminole County wishes to express its appreciation to Cecilia on behalf of the staff and citizens of Seminole County for her dedicated service. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners acknowledge with appreciation the service provided to Seminole County by Cecilia Monti and commends her for her dedication and commitment to her career in Seminole County government. Be it further resolved that this retirement resolution be presented to Cecilia Monti along with our sincere best wishes in her retirement, and a copy be spread upon the official minutes of the Board of County Commissioners, presented this 11th day of January 2022.
Second.
A motion, second, any discussion? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion passed unanimously. Great.
Environmental Services Budget Office. Y'all are getting them come down and take a picture together? All the budget. Photos? We can't get a picture. Gary? Who else? It's a team effort. George have?
No, you do it with your budget.
Can everybody see?
Yeah.
Get in the back.
Ready? 1, 2, 3.
First of all, I have to say, I'm one of 9 children, and I'm not used to so much attention here. So I wanted to go quietly, but there's several people in the county that insisted otherwise, and prepared parties and other going-away presents for me. It's amazing. I'd like to thank God and family for all my blessings in my life, for the opportunity to work for Seminole and Volusia County. I kind of split my time between the two, but a little more on Seminole side. George Sellery was responsible for me coming to Seminole County and to Volusia County. He's my biggest supporter, I guess, in recommending me to the budget office. But I started here in 1983 working with Rick Holt in the Public Works Department, and I stayed there for a short stint. And then I went to, worked under Penny Fleming in the budget office, and Barbara O'Hara under the budget office too, who was my mentor in trim compliance and revenue learnings and things like that. And then I went over to Volusia County and worked for George and Doug Kruger. Came back to Seminole County, worked for Lisa Spriggs and Lynn Polk in the budget. And when they left, worked under Tim Jeffs and Lori for a short bit before Carrie and Terry took me over to the Environmental Services Department to see my way out. And I'm so appreciative to everyone in this county, to all the staff members who make everything work for all of our departments, to Wanda and Vanessa, who are the best team that I could imagine working with over environmental, and just to all of those who have shown their appreciation to me. I'm thankful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Okay, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. First, pursuant to Florida law, the public has the right to be heard on all propositions except for when the Board of County Commissioners acting on administrative or emergency matters and conducting the meeting exempt from Section 286.011 Florida statute. Public comment time of propositions are scheduled for 3 minutes for individuals, 6 minutes for group representations. The right to be heard on quasi-judicial hearings is governed by Florida law. The public will be provided the opportunity to be heard on non-agenda items at the end of the meeting. Proper decorum will be observed. Before we move to consent agenda, is there any items that need to be added or changed? I'd like to ask the county manager.
Just item 29, this item was moved to the public hearing agenda this afternoon.
Yeah, we're going to get to that.
Nothing on the consent agenda, sir.
So item number 29 is moved to the afternoon session, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Commissioners? Commissioner Lockhart?
I'd like to remove item 4 for
4.
discussion.
Okay. Anyone else? So 4 and 29. 29 is being moved to the afternoon, 4 will be moved for a separate discussion. Is there direction from the board?
Yes.
Zimbauer?
I'll make a motion to approve items 3 through 26, less 4, for Commissioner Lockhart's consideration by the board separate and apart.
Second.
Okay, the motion is second. Any discussion on the motion? Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. We'll hear item number 4. Commissioner Lockhart?
The reason I pulled this for separate consideration actually is twofold. One is we had a lot of public comment, and some folks that are here today actually sent us emails about this, so I thought it would be important that we at least acknowledge that it's being taken up and discussed. And the second reason for bringing it up is that this is in a different format than it was originally brought to our county. When this was originally proposed by the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council, there was some language in here that I know caused me and some other members of our team some concern in terms of our ability to be autonomous in many ways. So I see Alan Harris is at the podium, and I will allow him to speak to that, certainly, and anything else related to this, but I just wanted my fellow commissioners to know that going back and rereading some of the things that have changed, my concerns have been put to rest.
So I won't take much of your time then. Alan Harris, Chief Administrator for the Office of Emergency Management. The collaborative MOU has slightly been adjusted. We have participated in the collaborative since day one, but not as an official member. By joining the MOU, by joining the collaborative, this makes Seminole County eligible for some grants that are going to be coming out. The state of Florida has just assigned an individual for resiliency. Over the last year, this board has done quite a few things. First, you renamed this Seminole County Local Mitigation Strategy Working Group to the Seminole County Resiliency Working Group, and as part of that, some of this new MOU that you referenced is already being taken care of. Some of the collaborative items have already been started related to that. We have started some of the mitigation projects that this MOU, while signing on to this, you're already doing it. In fact, we completed 2 of the projects already, the electrical vehicle charging stations, which I know Constantine will be very happy about, so he can charge his vehicles at the courthouse and the sports complex, and we also have one at the public safety building, and I heard Zimbauer may be getting one soon too, so you can charge your vehicle there too, as well as other mitigation projects related to stormwater, to river cleanups and things like that. So by joining this collaborative, number one, we're just part of all the other counties in Central Florida that are working together to strengthen resiliency across Central Florida. And number two, it makes us eligible for grants. So I'll try to be brief.
Thank you.
Great.
Appreciate it. We'll go to the public. Shani, is there anyone, we have any written requests?
Yes, sir, we do. We have Charles Lee, followed by Bill Hyde.
Okay. Please do.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Charles Lee, Director of Advocacy of Audubon, Florida. We've been working around the state to encourage and support these resiliency compacts. I'm glad that this one is coming in for a good landing here in Seminole County. And the one thing that I'd like to emphasize is that in the rubric of Governor DeSantis's program, Resilient Florida Funding, there is a prioritized scheme, if you will, to give prioritized funding to the counties that are in these compacts. And it's a very good way of prioritizing the focus of the limited funds that are available on coordinated efforts. And this coordinated effort in Central Florida is going to be something that we think will be a font of some very good outcomes. And so we want to thank you for all of the work that has been done on this. I think that the governor has taken great leadership in this with his program, and this brings everything together locally. And so Audubon, Florida is very supportive, and we hope that other compacts like this around the state will also materialize and give strength to this effort statewide. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Next.
Next, we have Bill Hyde.
Mr. Hyde? And Shani, can you just remember to start the clock after to give their name and address, please?
Good morning. My name is Bill Hyde. I live at 2379 Audley Street in Oviedo. I'm addressing item number 20, which is the Lake Hayes sidewalk issue. I wish I had an instant replay button so I could just replay this whole thing all over again. It's been bouncing around for a number of years. It was a bad idea when it started. It came to the commission. It was a bad idea then. Nothing's changed. The neighborhood is still not a walkable neighborhood. Never has been. Never will be. The engineering of the plan is beyond anything I can imagine. I mean, why you would have a street with no outlet, have a sidewalk halfway down one side, cross over and halfway down the other side, that's beyond me. If you think that people are going to walk halfway down and then follow the rules and go across this crosswalk and go all the way down, you know that's just not going to happen. I can't speak for a group. I don't have a great Facebook following, but I can tell you that several of my neighbors that are right on Lake Hayes Road are not too keen on this. And what bothers me is, at the last meeting, Commissioner DeLaury brought up an excellent point that I have yet to hear addressed, and that is that the money is being spent here, the increases and stuff. I mean, I've talked to the finance about that. I get how those things happen. But there are schools in Seminole County that still don't have sidewalks running up to them. I could take you and drive you to one right now that several streets directly abut the entrance to an elementary school, and there are no sidewalks. I'm not going to tell you which one, because those neighbors might not want a sidewalk either.
Here we go.
But my point is that this was going to be addressed, and there was going to be a report, and there was going to be all kinds of information come back on why we don't have sidewalks here, but we're sticking them in some place where people may or may not even want them. I got a question, why this keeps coming back. It's just beyond me. The communications through Public Works has been mediocre at best on this whole thing. I'm not getting any feedback or any even real opportunities to change the plan, to suggest another plan. So I'm hoping that you will finally, once and for all, pull this off. Take the money, put it to sidewalks where somebody really needs them, where kids that are walking to school, would be safer. My street is not going to be safer if you ram those sidewalks in. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Bill.
Commissioner Delory,
Yes, ma'am.
or Mr. Applegate, since we took that item up under the consent agenda, is there any desire to bring that back, and what would that remedy be?
The person on the, I think it was unanimous, so any member could bring it up for reconsideration.
And does the district commissioner have an opinion about that?
I don't, because I believe the staff has addressed the concerns.
Okay.
And my big issue in hearing this several months ago was that to make sure that there was proper funding for the schools in the area. And I believe staff has presented that to us. At least I've received it. I don't know if anyone else has. But there's enough money in the sidewalk fund to provide adequate sidewalks to schools. And if you'd like to hear from Mr. Dredge, I'm sure he'd be more than happy to repeat that. Anyone else?
I'd love the information.
Okay. Mr. Dredge?
Good morning. For the record, George Ash, Public Work Director. Last meeting, about a few months ago, you asked us to go back and evaluate to make sure we have money for our school. I have a prepared memo at that time and sent it to every one of you. And the memo is dated August 18th. And I asked if anybody has any question, want to discuss it. And I did not receive anything from the commissioners. And that's what, and then I discussed it with the Commissioner Delory, that memo in one of my briefing. And that's what we brought it back. Because that project, it is infill sidewalks that already exist in some sidewalk. Is that street? The street on the penny tax list.
Thank you, Mr. Dredge. Commissioner Zimbaud and Commissioner Constantine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Dredge, for getting that information out to us. And this has been a topic that continues, and I can't reiterate again, I guess I can and will, that if we're going to have a sidewalk policy, then we need to adhere to that policy. And what continues to happen is, when a policy has been put in place, it's been adjusted, it's been amended, it's been changed, and I think we all get it, except maybe in my district where we don't have sidewalks because people drive lifted four-wheel drive trucks for the most part and don't even have paved roads. But the reality is, you're always going to have folks that want sidewalks and don't want sidewalks. And we run into this all the time with changing demographics in a given geographic area through this county, where we have folks that have raised their families, now they're into retirement, they've enjoyed their oak trees and all the flora and fauna that's in their front yard, and now we're putting sidewalks in. They don't want them. And as we've learned, the young families that are now moving into those neighborhoods who have young children, they do want them. So it's always a battle back and forth, and I get it, and I understand it, but sooner or later, we have to resign ourselves as a board. Again, if we need to readjust the policy, then let's do it, instead of going through this each and every time. But we did address, the school issue that came up months ago to ensure that we had that walkability. I mean, the whole push through our community as well as others is the walkability of communities as time goes on, and the connectability of communities, and having those children, elderly folks, have that safety mechanism of not walking in the road or walking through somebody's yard, et cetera, et cetera. So there's so many moving parts, but, I would urge my fellow board members, if we don't like the policy, then let's change it. Bring it up, let's change it, let's decide who gets sidewalks and who doesn't, outside of what we already have.
Thank you, Commissioner Constantine.
It's been addressed.
Commissioner Lockhart. I'll go to Commissioner Hart.
Yeah. Policies are great things, and unfortunately, when you talk about individual neighborhoods, one size doesn't always fit all, and so I feel like this is a situation where we do need to have some flexibility as a board to recognize, particularly in our older established neighborhoods, that retrofitting sidewalks into some of them creates a huge disturbance. And I, for one, am not interested in taking the ability away from this board or from citizens to be able to petition this board to do something other than what might be, an established policy. I'm not comfortable with making it quite that black and quite that white. I think we live in a lot of gray in what we do here, and that's why we're elected, is to sometimes make those tougher decisions. So I think our policy currently that we work under establishing sidewalks is certainly reasonable, but I'm not interested in saying that we will only follow it to the red letter of the law and not be interested in taking input or being flexible in situations where it might need to be looked at differently. That's just my perspective.
Thank you. Commissioner Hart.
John, while you're walking up here, I'll address the policy question, but I would like you to address three things that were stated that I think need to be clarified. One is why the engineering has somebody crossing the street to get to the other side. Not a joke.
Chicken.
The second piece is the communication, and then the third piece is the statement that there are schools that don't have sidewalk connectivity. You did mention that we have money for that, but please talk us through when does that happen? And then I do want to still come back to policy because he's ready to speak now.
The first question, the reason we cross from the north to the south, because there is a large drainage system ditch on the north side. We cannot get that sidewalk all the way. The second one about the sidewalk with the school. We coordinate with the school board staff. We coordinate with the sheriff. And we have member of our staff or those community. Anytime they have a concern or they have any area where they want a sidewalk, we'll take it, we'll make it as a priority, and we address it.
And so there's no schools that currently need sidewalks?
It is my memo, when I sent it, and I listed some of those projects, and we coordinate with them. And I'm not aware of any other a project or any other request from the schools as a time. And they meet regularly or monthly, and we take it seriously, and anytime they bring, we do not wait even to the next budget meeting. We include it in the immediate years, and we make it as a priority. And to my understanding, we had a good relationship with the school, with the sheriff, to make sure safety is addressed, and it is very at the high top of our priority.
And then the third one was communication?
Communication. We did a public meeting, and it is a visual. Okay. And we only have one individual did not care about the sidewalk in that area. We did have, as I said, we did not have opposition, and we also, anybody has any issue, want to meet in the field to discuss it, we will be glad to do that. And to my understanding, the community in that area, on that street, they are welcome to the sidewalk. We did not have what I saw opposition. I'm talking about the street itself. As a community, we don't, with the sidewalk, we don't go for the entire area. What we do, we concentrate on that sidewalk for the street. That's what we are, but we extend if you have issue or anybody along that street, we'll meet with them, and also during construction, the contractor, if there's any issue with individual, homeowner, stuff like that, we meet with them, with our staff, and we address it. And our staff has been very good about it, to accommodate anything we can do for the resident.
Okay. Commissioner, you want to talk about the policy?
Yes, so I actually don't believe what the commissioners to my left and right are saying is mutually exclusive, and thank you, John. I think that we can have a policy that gives some flexibility, but I do agree that we can't have a policy that we continue to subvert. So we either need to look at the policy and revise it so that it gives that flexibility, or decide that we're going to stick to the black and white, but this continues to come up, and I don't think it's coming up in the way that makes it productive, because it should be coming up ahead of time.
Okay. Commissioner Lockhart.
So I found the memo, John, thank you, and there are several pages of outlining places where sidewalks are missing to schools, from the sheriff's office to our engineering team, and for each location, there is a comment in red that either says, this belongs to the city, this belongs to the city, this belongs, or this will be addressed during a certain project, or there is insufficient right-of-way, or there's a lot of, there's an explanation for every missing link. But I think what we're asking and what the citizens are asking is, how do we get past those speed bumps and get the sidewalks in? If it means coordinating with the city of Castleberry or the city of Oviedo or the city of Altamont, then let's do that, rather than just saying, sorry, that belongs to the city. That might be a suggestion.
John, would you like to address that?
While he's coming up, Commissioner's question,
Commissioner
while he's
Zimbo.
going to be here, it's going to be for Mr. Dredge.
It is also every city, they are on that committee, which involves the school. We have a representative from every city on that committee, and also the sheriff. So they are aware of it. The one for the right-of-way, we work to obtain those right-of-way, and we do the project. Some of them take a little bit longer than others. Some of them through development, some of them we purchase, some of them donation. But we do not, but for the city, it is, all the city has a member on that community, on that committee, as they are aware of it.
Thank you, John. Commissioner Zimbo, you had a follow-up question?
That was one of my questions about the cities being involved. My understanding, the cities are involved with your group in having that discussion and being on their radar and so forth. And notwithstanding that we don't have any joint planning agreements in effect, and we've tried to get some of these cities to give us the ability to have joint planning agreements, sometimes also is a problem on getting some of these projects to connect. But the final question I have is, do you believe under the current policy that this board has given you the appropriate flexibility in being able to move the sidewalks in and around oak trees or other aspects of a community in order to try to get the connectability within the right-of-way without taking out trees and other infrastructures and assets that the community, of course, enjoys?
Yes, I do. And also, some of the community, and we done more than once the last few months, is that the majority is very established community, and one of them is Rolling Hill, okay? So we had a lot, that one. So we did not go ahead with the project. So any area where the establishments, the majority of the communities, they do not want it, we don't just go ahead with it. I sent a memo to every one of you on that community, and our recommendation, do not go forward at that time. And we evaluated after the park established. So we listen and we do it to the community, and because those sidewalks, those improvements, it is for the community. If the community don't want it, doesn't make sense from staff point of view to go ahead and put it. So we don't take it just blindly and say, we want to put a sidewalk in here. We have listened more than one time, more than one community to make sure it is, if it really doesn't fit, there's a lot of issue, a lot of opposition, we listen to them, we meet with them, and we have, this year has.
Thank you, John.
Done that.
Commissioner Constantine?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to circumvent this discussion because we had already agreed on number 20. But since we got into a bigger discussion, number one, on 20, I have a great deal of respect for Mr. Hyde. We've talked about this. I read the memo. I was also satisfied that the district commissioner had looked at the issue and felt that the concerns had been addressed. I wish that everyone, when we go to their neighborhoods, wants to have a sidewalk. Like, obviously, that's not going to happen all the time. The one thing that, now talking about the bigger policy, and I agree with Commissioner Herr, they're not mutually exclusive in what both Commissioner Zimbauer and Commissioner Lockhart said. And one of the things that I believe is extremely important is, as we know that something is coming up, and I've said this at the staff briefing, we get to the neighborhood. We get to folks that live in that neighborhood, and we ask them, what their concerns are before it ever gets here, so that we can start addressing those. And I know that sometimes that happens, and I know that sometimes it has not happened, because we've had to deal with it up here on the dais. So that's the one thing that I think our policy needs to ensure. And to the greatest extent possible, so that folks like Mr. Hyde, even though he may not feel satisfied, at least knows that he had been listened to.
Thank you. Any more discussion on this item about sidewalks? Okay, thank you. We're still on item number 4. Shaney, can we have the next speaker, please?
Those were the only speakers signed up.
She didn't.
Sorry. Okay. Gabrielle Milch, please.
Good morning. My name is Gabrielle Milch, and today I'm here representing the St. Johns River Keeper, and we are part of the Resiliency Cooperative, and I have attended at least the last year of meetings, and I feel that it is a really important step that the county's taken. I want to thank you all for doing that, and just a couple little reminders about, our peril of flood and sea level rise and inland flooding with the St. Johns River. She's a mighty river. I know that some of the activities and things that people do outside, now there's a lot of heat issues with workers, and if you have, your staff and things, and with climate change and the heat index and things, it's dangerous for a lot of people to work outside. And I'd love to get a report back from your commission, perhaps yearly or something, where you all could inform the citizens a little bit at this level or some type of a website. Also, I'd like to address some of the wetland protections in the riparian habitat zones adjacent to the river, because they do hold the water and do protect it, and if you put people right up on the water, it could be a problem. And also, I'd like to let you know that this year, we're going to start the first St. John's State of the River program, and later on, I'm going to ask you to participate, but we'd like to get Seminole County involved in the State of the River. They do it in Jacksonville. It's been done for 20 years, and so we'd like to implement that in the city and would like cooperation and help from the Chamber of Commerce or all the folks who are involved. So thank you again for signing that today, and I'm sorry it got pulled, but I'm glad it got pulled. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel.
So since that was the last written request, is there anyone else in the audience that'd like to speak to the board? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Direction for the board?
Commissioner, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'm thankful that Commissioner Lockhart brought this up or pulled it, because like Ms. Milch said, it does deserve to the light of the day. This is something that we have been working on. It's something that the Regional Planning Council has been working on, and both Commissioner Lockhart and I have participated in those meetings. And I think it's not only time, but it's also very important that Seminole County, being the bridgehead, if you will, of the Upper St. John's, is participating in this regionally. So with that, I will move approval of item number 4.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on item 4? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Thank you. We'll now move on to item number 27, which is the county attorney's item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This resolution codifies your approval at the last meeting, amending sections 235 and 240 of your official policies and procedures. 235 now makes it official that the board meetings will be on the second and fourth Tuesday, regular meetings, and under 2.40, work sessions will be on the third Tuesday, and section 1.45, the reorganization meeting in November, the vote for chairman and vice chairman will be at the end of the meeting when they will assume their duties. I wanted a resolution so that we can keep track of the changes as time goes by.
Okay, thank you. Before we go to the board, I'd like to ask the public, is there any written requests like to speak? Anyone in the audience would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll go for board direction.
Move approval.
Second.
A motion is second. Commissioner Herr?
Question with regard to now blocking the third Thursday for the entire year for work sessions.
That's if needed.
Third Tuesday.
Third
Tuesday.
sorry. Yeah, I heard Thursday, okay.
It's Tuesday.
So third Tuesday. Walk us through the advance notice, et cetera, process, decision of what gets worked.
Anything that would be a work session would be at the direction of the board. The staffing or the board would also provide us with their intention of date, and we would work that into the calendars. Our goal would be that it would be at least a month in advance, so that we have ample time to adequately public notice it and make any preparations that would be necessary for having a successful work session.
Commissioner Zimbauer?
Go ahead, Commissioner Herzl. I don't think it's finished yet.
Yep. So my thoughts for the record are that the 5 of us sit in governing roles, not managing roles, that we can work session the staff to death, that hosting work sessions takes them out of their day-to-day responsibilities to a considerable degree, and that we all be judicious around what we're looking for. Just because we put this day on the calendar doesn't mean we need to fill it.
from a staff perspective, we would concur 100% with that.
I'm certain you would. I'm seeing the gleeful
One of
nod.
the things
We're
that
not
we-
nodding out there, but
Yeah.
I see it.
One of the things that we've talked with staff about, and I've mentioned it with my conversations with you individually, is that my goal moving forward would be that the majority of what we bring to this board is in a presentation format with a with a presentation that is both educational and a recommendation for your approval on action to move forward. It would be those things that are not ready for presentation that would be work session worthy, things that are just coming out of the ground, things that really need open discussion among the five of you to give us direction as to where to go and move forward. So that would be our intent, and our hope would be that you don't have an inordinate amount of those that you would ask us for.
Agreed, and my...
Just before we move on, Commissioner, anything else?
No, thank
Okay.
you.
Commissioner Zimbauer?
Thank you. I concur completely. There's a place and time for work sessions, workshops when they're absolutely needed and necessary. Likewise, I want to make sure that we understand work sessions, in my mind, should be open to the public and also should be televised. That's been a problem in the past. We've had workshops and work sessions that are not televised, and I think they ought to be.
Was that, are you looking for feedback to give direction, or is that your
I'm
opinion?
always looking for feedback and interaction with my fellow commissioners.
So-
It's the only time we get to talk.
Well, yeah, if that's something that we're looking for to give direction to the county manager on, I would be interested in having everything that we do as a group be televised. I don't have a problem with that at all. I think we were moving some of the work sessions previously upstairs, and that caused difficulty with the new security measures for people to be able to get up there in a timely fashion. And so I think it's appropriate for us to have work sessions here and the technology that we have available. That would be my opinion as well. I think, the pendulum can swing really far one way or the other, right? And what we're trying to do is get the pendulum to kind of be in the middle here with the work sessions. And I'm hoping that this will be our opportunity to do that. When Commissioner Zimbauer and I got here, I don't think we were really doing work sessions at all. And then a full-blown policy would show up in an agenda book for us to vote on, and we had no opportunity as a board to discuss it at all. And then we wound up bringing that item back 2, 3, and 4 times because we were then having to treat this meeting as the work session. And it wasn't working for us that way either. So we started, well, let's workshop it so that staff can get direction and know what to actually bring forward in the form of a policy so that they have an idea of what may or may not be adopted. Certainly, we don't want to workshop at all. I agree 100%, but somewhere I'm counting on our county staff team to find that sweet spot for us so that you know where we're coming from before too much work and effort has been put into bringing forward a policy.
That's the goal.
Got it.
Any other discussion?
Just to say that over the last 2 years, we've had a lot of issues that they needed direction, and we've been able to achieve that. So I see this year as, unless other issues that we aren't familiar with right now come up, that we probably won't have as many, or shouldn't have as many work sessions as we've had in the past. We did the hard work over the last 2 years.
And I would agree with that, like Commissioner Lockhart indicated.
Any other discussion?
There should be, one thing that could help this, I believe, is that a new commissioner orientation that's put in place so the new commissioners understand land use, they understand budget, government budget and fiscal decision-making process. I mean, all that for someone coming in from the outside that has no experience in that area at all can be very daunting and very confusing and may be helpful with those things. But the workshops that we've done in the last couple of years, I think, are just a byproduct of many years of things just went along in a certain way and have not been addressed. I think we've done a pretty good job in the last couple of years trying to nail those down. So I would concur as needed.
And just...
Commissioner Lockhart?
Well, I think something was just said that was unintended, or there was an implication there that was unintended. A lack of agreement does not denote a lack of understanding.
Absolutely.
Agreement?
I just think I needed to say that out
I'm
loud.
not sure.
We'll talk about it later.
Why don't we talk about it now? I mean,
I'll be glad to address it since I'm the new commissioner. There is this underlying current that the new commissioner may not understand something when the new commissioner doesn't agree with the other commissioners, and that, I don't think that's intentional, but that's certainly the message that's getting out there. I do spend a considerable amount of time briefing and reading and doing all of that stuff, and didn't come into this position completely cold. So I don't think that's the intention of the statements, but it does continue to play through as an undercurrent that we probably would do better to not have.
well, that was not neither the intent whatsoever. You don't have to look far around this county and find elected officials who have now taken a position that don't have any training, don't have any background, and without some kind of orientation, then you're left to your own devices.
We have item number 27, and it's not involving commissioner orientation. It's just what's on the, we can discuss that.
We've
Figure
already
that out later.
Yeah.
Any other items to discuss on item number 27? We have a motion, we have a second. Seeing no other discussion, all in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign, motion passes. Thank you. We'll now move on to item number 28.
Move approval.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any public input?
Nobody has
Anybody in
asked.
the audience? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion passes. Thank you. We'll now move on to the regular agenda item. As listed on our agenda, item number 29 is being moved to the afternoon. So we'll now move on to item number 30, which is presented by staff.
Morning, Commissioners. I'm Timothy Jex with Resource Management. Item number 30 is our annual carry forward. It's a budget amendment to carry forward available balances for existing projects from FY21 and reappropriate them in the current fiscal year 22. There's a one-page summary of this BAR on page 672 of your agenda, and a full list of every project being carried forward begins on page 677. These are the 6 types of budgets that are eligible for carry forward. It's the county's policy to fully fund the cost of these projects based on the completion of a scope, which may cross over multiple fiscal years. Last year, there were 936 active projects, of which 316 were completed or closed out, and this BAR will reappropriate budgets for the remaining 620 active projects. The total amount of the BAR is $511 million, of which $15 million is related to completed projects where the balance is being closed out to reserves. This leaves a combined carry forward of $496 million between the active projects and the remaining active grants. If you take out reserves and grants, the total project carry forward is $329 million, which is shown on the left. Our grant carry forward represents the biggest increase over last year, where we're carrying forward a total of $167 million across 151 total budgets. In addition to the $96 million in ARPA funds, we have another $13 million in community services grants and $3 million related to public works capital projects being carried forward. ARPA funds must be spent by December of 2024, and most of the remaining grants are expected to be fully expended in the current fiscal year, except for those that are part of multi-year agreements. $67 million of this BAR represents the remaining balance on the line of credit to fund our 5 Points Complex Court Annex, Energy Plant, and Parking Garage. This project is currently underway. Now we're going to move on to the more traditional part of our carry forward, which totals $262 million. The largest remaining piece is our sales tax program, where last year we had 221 budgeted projects. $43 million was expended, and $135 million is being carried forward across the remaining 152 active projects. This includes $22 million for Oxford Road and $9 million for the E.E. Williamson Trail Connection. A full list of every project being carried forward in the sales tax program starts on page 690 of your agenda. Next is our Utilities Engineering Capital Program. In FY21, there were $75 million budgeted across 112 projects. $10 million was expended, and $64 million is being carried forward. The Environmental Services Department is requesting a partial revalidation of their project list to establish 11 new utilities projects using funds transferred from other deferred projects in their program. This will reorganize their project list into a family structure, which will allow for better project management and transparency. A list of all new and deferred projects in the Utilities Engineering Program is included on page 644 of your agenda. There's also an additional 21 projects being carried forward for $8 million in the Solid Waste Division. This leaves 422 projects and fleet budgets totaling $55 million to be carried forward, including $24 million for public safety projects, $14 million for fleet, $6 million for technology initiatives, and $11 million for other facilities and equipment. Many of these projects are already underway and expected to be completed in the current fiscal year. That concludes my presentation, and staff is here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Before we go to the commissioners, I'd like to ask the public, do we have any written requests?
I have no written request, sir.
Is there an audience that'd like to address the board on this item? We'll close public input if I have no requests. Now we'll go to board questions. Commissioners? Commissioner?
I'll just say thank you
Lockhart?
so much for taking the time to go through all of this, you and Lori both together. I think I appreciated some of the changes in the formatting from last year to this year. It allowed me to see things a little more clearly, so I appreciate that. It is so helpful when we have this large carry forward that's a unique year that we have that time ahead of time to have those conversations. So thank you both for that.
Direction from the board.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion passed unanimously. Good job, Tim and Lori and staff. Want to move on to county managers and staff briefing. Item number 31, which is the Lake Mary small area study. We'll hear from staff at this time.
Good morning, Commissioners. David Nelson was not able to attend to this morning's meeting, so I'll be doing the presentation. My name is Mary Segarra, Senior Planner for Development Services. As you know, we have come to you with this presentation. This is our fourth time, and hopefully the last time. Right now, because David Nelson could not do the presentation while we just wanted to bring the overview of what were the changes that were made since the last time you saw this presentation back in October. We added a slide that Rebecca is giving you a copy of that just highlights the changes that we made since you saw this in October. So as you know, we've been working this since about 1.5 years in the study in combination with the Airport Authority and the City of Sanford. And based on the feedback back in October, the following changes were made to the study. We added a jurisdictional map of the City of Sanford and the county to clearly establish what are the properties that are part of the county and which ones are part of the city. We added specific language of in regards to either restricting residential or not encouraging residential in specific districts, as according to the feedback that we got from you. And also, we added language on existing projects that are currently being approved by this board or are in the works to be approved, such as the landscape improvement in East Lake Mary Boulevard, a possible light on Celery in State Road 46, and also a trail in Midway, among other projects that also have been included. Also, language and map of future airport access road from State Road 417. No, that's not a State Road, sorry. I apologize. 417 to East Lake Mary Boulevard. A map to the back of the report has been added indicating the dashed line of possible connection. As you all know, this is a study that was approved by the Expressway that is going to start this year. And the outcome of that study will be projected hopefully by the end of this year. And lastly, there was concern about existing wildlife in the area, and it was a concern of the board, so some mitigation and language to protect existing wildlife has been incorporated to the study as well. So those were the changes that were made based on the feedback on October. I'll be glad to go over any other questions that you might like.
Thank you. Before we go to the board, do we have any written requests?
No, sir.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the board on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Questions from the board? Commissioner Zimbauer.
Do you feel that we're having a good, consistent conversation on this study as far as it pertains to the JPA conversation that's currently going on?
Absolutely. We've been in close conversation with the city of Sanford. They are very informed of the changes that we made. We had a meeting with them last month presenting these changes and the final report. And then the next step is going to be working with them in incorporating these recommendations into the JPA.
Great. And you feel that we have engaged all the community stakeholders? I see folks from Midway Coalition here today.
Yeah, as far as the extension of the study, since the actual study did not include Midway.
Understood.
They have been in communication with David Nelson and myself with some of their concerns, and we have definitely taken them in consideration.
Great, thank you. That's all I have.
Any discussion from the board? Commissioner Constantine?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The biggest concern I've had is that we don't cause future problems, specifically that we don't have, too much of residential that would be affected by the airport. And for the record, I just want to make sure that we have taken all of that into consideration. And as I look, it seems that we have ensured that, to the best of our ability, that we're not going to have the NIMBY situation where people come back and say, there's too much noise from the airport and it's going over our house and everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other discussion? Okay. Direction from the board?
I make a motion to approve it.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, signal by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion passed unanimously. Now move on to item number 32. This will be the first time we're actually seeing some of these items.
Good morning. For the record, Rebecca Hammock, Development Services Director. We're here today to hopefully present our last conceptual overview of a few issues that we're looking at revising and adding to the Land Development Code. Eliza Harris-Giuliano is here from Kane & Associates, and she's going to present on mixed use, parking garages, solar development, and then we also have Jeff Hopper from staff that's going to provide a brief status update on rural non-residential design standards. We're hoping to come to you in the future at an official work session. If the board is amenable, that could be separately scheduled on that third Tuesday to go through the actual strike through and underline of the code changes. So for now, we just wanted to provide an introduction to some of these items. You have seen a couple of these previously, just to make sure there weren't any major questions so that we could take those back and actually put words to paper and get those strike through and underline. And with that, I'll hand it over to Eliza.
Good morning, everyone. Great to see you again. We try to make our presentations comprehensive, but we also know you're limited on time, so I'll be going through this slide deck fairly quickly. Of course, I'm always happy to answer comments and questions if they arise either from the presentation or anything else that's in the board packet. So if I move quickly through some of these slides, again, happy to go back. You've seen me before, and you will see me again, as Rebecca mentioned, as part of that overall strike-through and underline. I'm going to start with parking and garage design guidelines, move into solar, and then mixed-use corridor development. Parking garages we have spoken about before, and you asked us to come back specifically with addressing the question of architectural design. So we've addressed more than that in the slides, but I'll focus on the architectural design component. Based on board direction, we agreed that the architectural design should be focused on compatibility, so not sort of any particular architectural style, but being in context with the surrounding area. And for most of these parking garages, which are part of a suburban redevelopment project, it will be in context with the other buildings within the same project. So that means scale and mass and intensity, as well as the design of the structure. And that, as you can see from the images, can vary quite widely depending on the character of the buildings being proposed. So what do we mean by that? We mean it complements nearby buildings, both in the project and, if appropriate, outside the project. We also are worried about things like respecting the pedestrian environment, especially as we are talking about going towards more mixed-use and walkable environments in at least some of these redevelopments. I will also note that we have specific guidelines for parking garages within mixed-use developments, which I won't talk about today in detail, but I want you to be aware of that. It is in your packet relative to the mixed-use section. But there is the expectation that in addition to being compatible with nearby structures, that the structure would have an architectural integrity within its own design, as well as integrating landscaping. Now, how do we ensure that? We ask them to submit architectural elevations for any elevation that's going to be visible from the public realm, as well as landscape and circulation plans. You can't, with site planning, you can't always say a hard line of you will never do this, but we want to say, if possible, try to orient these garage entrances away from public streets and away from the more visible parts of the public realm. In this particular image, you can see that parking garage entrance was set back from the main structure in order to minimize its visual impact on the public realm, and that's just one strategy that could be used. In addition, as I mentioned, if the parking garage is located within a street context like this, it can be blended really well into the architecture surrounding it. But there's also more modern approaches that can be used, as we've shown in some of the other images, to achieve that compatibility, such as artwork, lattices, and screens that can be used. And then, I won't go into the circulation elements, but we want to keep everybody safe, whether they're in a car, on a bike, or walking through that parking garage. And of course, where we started this discussion had to do with lighting, which can be dealt with in basically two ways. The first is to design the lighting itself, both the location of the fixtures as well as shielding the fixtures so that the light coming out from those bulbs goes where we want it to go and not where we don't want it to go. And then in addition, adding exterior screening, like what you see in this image, to diffuse that light as it's coming out of the parking structure and reduce the glare that might be coming onto side streets or adjacent buildings. We were also asked to look briefly at electric vehicle charging standards, I guess apparently for Commissioner Constantine and Commissioner Zembauer. Sorry, that was not from those gentlemen, but I understand that we may have some electric cars in the House. So the best practices around this, we looked at sample ordinances from around the country and found some standards for what that might look like. This is not specific to parking garages. It could be both in surface lots and structured parking. It can be required or incentivized. And really the best practice seems to be, rather than requiring the charging station itself, which can be a little more expensive, requiring that they be EV ready so that they have the built-in wiring and infrastructure so that those EV charging stations can be put in, which is a pretty reasonable ask of a developer and is something that is expensive to do after the fact. So that's the discussion of parking garages. I can move straight into solar energy.
Can I, just if, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
Just to finish with that,
This is not a work session, just a presentation.
No, I understand. I just want to say, I concur with the recommendation on the electric vehicles. Right now, it's a choice, and Commissioner Zimbauer and I have chosen to purchase electric vehicles, but in the future, it's not going to be a choice, so, because everybody's going to electric vehicles. So, I just concur with your analysis. We don't want to regulate it, but we do want to make sure that they have it available when when it's necessary. So thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Continue, please.
Moving into solar energy regulations. This current state of play is the code does not explicitly address solar energy facilities. In addition, the state has preempted local jurisdictions on a number of areas in terms of regulating solar facilities. So we're limited by that. And part of that is that rooftop solar is permitted basically everywhere in the state of Florida. In addition, actually, since we put this presentation together, we learned about new state statute that limits how solar energy can be regulated, particularly within agricultural zones and with respect to buffering and screening. So we know that Seminole County, per the comprehensive plan, wants to encourage and support solar energy facilities. So these regulations are designed to create proper boundaries on that, but also to encourage their construction. People who are developing new facilities don't like unknowns, and it's better to have knowns in the code if you want to encourage that, rather than having everyone have to come in and make up their own rules. So there's three basic types: roof-mounted and building integrated. I'm describing as one type, ground-mounted and floating. Building integrated is what you see in the image, where essentially, if it's part of the structure of the building, such as an awning or, say, a residential carport, it would be regulated as whatever that structure is, and there wouldn't be independent zoning regulation of that solar facility. Probably what we're more familiar with is roof-mounted, some very, very basic regulations around that, just saying that it needs to match the roof so that it blends in within a reasonable, blends into a reasonable degree. Probably the most complex example is ground-mounted, and this is where you can see anything from a few panels in the backyard of someone's home to a solar energy farm. So this is probably the most complicated piece of the proposed regulations. Where it's an accessory use, it's limited to 20% of the lot, and that addresses the fact that people have widely varying lot sizes. And then there's an overall cap on the size of those uses to be considered accessory. And then for larger, more going towards the solar farm facilities, those are separately regulated as uses. There's a limitation on the total height of those ground-mounted solar facilities, as well as permitted locations in different zones, as well as they provide some really interesting opportunities in terms of supporting the county's goals around landscaping. So there's some great examples around the country of native and low-water grasses being used to accomplish the water use goals of the county, as well as things like preventing erosion and supporting pollinators. And all of that can be done because these solar facilities don't take up the ground space. And in fact, there's a need to have some sort of landscaping there that is not irrigated turf to keep that soil in place, and to, if there's an opportunity, if there's great existing native vegetation, to maintain that. This is the proposed use table. As I mentioned, roof-mounted and building integrated facilities are permitted everywhere. As they get into the larger ground-mounted facilities, those can be an accessory use, or they can be a separately regulated use for the larger facilities, where they're permitted either outright or by special exception in industrial and commercial zones, as well as in agricultural zones. I'll note that this presentation was put together before we were made aware of that new statute. So right now we're showing so these ground-mounted facilities as a special exception in agricultural zones. Per state statute, we may need to move to making that an outright permitted use. As I said, we do have some restrictions around the size and appropriateness of those facilities, for instance, where we have residential in agricultural areas. So we think that we've been able to deal with that for the most part in a way that will address the concerns. Did I? Oh, okay. And the last one, haven't got there yet. Sorry about that. we've got kind of a special case with parking lots. This is allowed to exceed that height limit that we have in typical ground-mounted facilities because they're serving as a shade canopy for the parking. And the other issue you have with parking lots is trees are typically required in parking lots, so we've come up with a proposal to balance the need for some trees around the edges of the parking lot, but having the ability to have fewer trees so that that solar canopy can be provided, and it provides the function of shade, which is one of the things that you're looking for trees in a parking lot under a typical situation. So this is an example from California where they've done essentially that. The solar is providing the the solar is providing the shade within the center of the parking lot, and the trees are providing aesthetic contribution around the edges of the parking lot. And finally, solar. Again, this is kind of a special case. We haven't seen a lot of this happening, but we did want to be prepared and potentially encourage it. This is viewed as an accessory use if it's less than 30% of a stormwater pond. So we're not talking about natural lakes. Any other use would be a special exception that would be reviewed by this board. There's also certain other best practices around, for instance, requiring decommissioning of these facilities if they're not used for a long period of time, as well as notifying utility companies and shielding off hazardous areas that we've also included. We did have a couple of questions that we may want to address in the future. Orange County, for instance, has a lower height limit for their solar panels in residential areas, limited to 8 feet, and they also require that those be fenced areas. We've required that they be in the backyard, but we haven't explicitly required fencing at this time. So those are areas where the board may want to provide feedback. And that's the end of the presentation on solar.
Thank you. Again, it's coming back to us, so you can provide the strikeouts and everything. Yes, Commissioner Lockhart?
We actually have a large ground-mounted solar device in a residential area currently in the front yard. It actually happens to be in Commissioner Herr's district, and a neighbor brought it to my attention not too long ago. But I'm not sure exactly how it happened, but it's worth a drive-by. It's on the side street next to Heathrow Elementary School. And I would say it would be worth everyone driving by to say this is what we don't want to see, because it's quite obtrusive. So I don't know how it happened. I don't know, but I'm glad we're doing this, and I want to make sure that others who may have the inclination to go solar somehow don't wind up doing it in a way that is offensive to their neighbors. So.
I think at the time it was installed, the neighborhood behind it was not there.
Thank you.
All right. Well, anyway, it's worth a drive-by if you haven't seen it already.
And the current proposal does limit to backyards, so
which would be fabulous. Yeah.
Perfect. We'll see a lot of that during the strikeouts, correct?
Yes, sir. I mean, everything will be provided during the strikeouts.
Okay.
And finally, the last of my items is mixed-use corridor district. This is something that you have seen before, so again, I'll move quickly through the slides you've seen before. But in short, it's supported by the comprehensive plan. There are areas in the comprehensive plan where it's designated within MXD and within our centers and corridors. We talked a little bit about why we call it a mixed-use corridor district. I won't repeat that. Essentially, we're talking about vertical or horizontal mixed use. The process would be, would always be a rezoning unless at some point in the future this board chooses to administratively rezone some land, because there is no land that has this mixed-use corridor district, because it doesn't exist yet. But there is a future land use district called MXD in which it would be appropriate, as well as within those centers and corridors. And when it comes to the board, they would be bringing forward the density, intensity, and proposed uses. The site plan is going to be approved administratively, consistent with the standards that are in the proposal. Fundamentally, when we're talking about mixed use, we are talking about walkable places, because we want people to walk between the uses in the mixed use project and between the uses in adjacent mixed use projects. So a lot of the standards are oriented towards encouraging walkability. This is an example of what not to do, which is interrupt your main street with a use that is not designed in a walkable manner with a walkable frontage. So one of the major pieces of this is the organization of the site, so such that areas of the site designed to be walkable would not be interrupted by needed things like parking and loading areas that should be there but could be oriented in a way that doesn't disrupt that walkable path. So we've organized into A, B, and C frontages, and A frontage is your typical kind of main street frontage, which is the most active pedestrian area. You've seen that before, but what you have not seen is the diagrams which specify what that looks like in the code in terms of how wide those areas are. And there is some range, so there's a minimum, which is wider than a typical neighborhood sidewalk, and the maximum, which is intended to encourage things like sidewalk dining. And these are just some examples from around the region. A B frontage is still important that it be oriented around the idea that people are going to be walking between uses, but we don't expect as much activity, therefore the sidewalks don't need to be as wide, the frontages don't need to be as elaborate. And this is what that looks like in diagram format, whereas with the A frontage, we typically would require on-street parking because you expect a lot of activity there, or we may see in the future that moves to curbside management, but we're not going to get into that. Whereas the B frontage, that on-street parking is optional, but you still want to require things like street trees. You may see more green areas, whereas in the high-traffic pedestrian areas, those green areas are likely to get trampled by pedestrian activity, which is supposed to be there. As the pedestrian activity goes down, the green areas go up. And this is some examples of what that looks like in Central Florida. And then finally, C frontages. These are the necessary but less fun to walk through areas of any development, such as parking and loading zones, the backs of buildings. And this is where there's a lot less structure, there's a lot more variation in what you might see, both in terms of parking, in terms of building placement. And this is an example from Winter Park Village of the less attractive parts of that project, but again, necessary to accommodate parking and loading. Then there's a special case with major road frontages, and as we said, this is a corridor, very often going to be happening on corridors, and our corridors are our large, busy roadways within Seminole County. So what do you do when a mixed-use project is on one of these large, busy roadways, which are, frankly, less comfortable to walk down? And the solution that we have for that is essentially deeper setbacks, which both those buildings don't want to be as close to the roadway, and giving pedestrians a little more distance from that high-speed traffic. This is what that looks like in diagram format. So the minimum setback is deeper, and then the maximum setback we didn't even draw because it would go off the page, but it would be 50 feet. And that can be both taken up with green areas or with something like, if someone did want to do something like sidewalk dining. This is some examples of that in Central Florida. As you can see, most of them are filled, that space is filled with green, but in some cases it could also be filled with increased pedestrian areas. And this is an example with on-street parking. Most of these major roadways don't have on-street parking, but we did want to show the possibility of on-street parking as well. Also, this can be done with small buildings. It doesn't, it has to be then a part of that larger corridor. And another great way to deal with this is by the addition of a frontage road, which again creates space between that busy high-speed roadway and the buildings and pedestrians, and additionally provides on-street parking without disrupting the traffic on that roadway. And this is an example of that in Metro West. Lastly, I think this is one of the last, if not the last points, we want to screen parking as part of supporting that pedestrian environment where it does exist, especially on those busy roadways, where parking is going to be necessary, but it doesn't necessarily support the goals of a walkable environment. We've essentially done two flavors of MUCD, 3-story and 6-story. In both cases, they have a required step back if you go to the maximum height. This is what that step back looks like on a 3-story building, where the 3rd story is just set back, which gives you a sense of a little bit lower scale. And that is it for the mixed-use presentation.
Thank you. Rebecca, who's next? Jeff?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll try to keep this brief. I know we're kind of in a hurry. I'm Jeff Hopper of Development Services. This is about rural non-residential design standards. In other words, this is a topic that's been floating around for a long time. The idea of controlling the development appearance of commercial and certain other non-residential buildings in the rural area. There's not a lot of opportunity for that to happen, but there is some. So you all directed us to go and meet with the residents out there. We've had 4 community meetings, lots of good discussion. I think we have sort of a general consensus now about what to do. And again, I'll hurry through this. I'll skip through some of these slides. They just basically say that Seminole County has already laid some of the track for this through existing comprehensive plan policies and code that talk about criteria for things like fences, walls, signage, landscaping, but don't quite go as far as building standards themselves. So our draft that you see in your package, again, it's not finalized. It just sort of represents where we are at the moment. The applicability is for commercial and other non-residential structures throughout the overlay corridor area, which is something that's already established under Part 55 of the code. Exemptions would be rural structures, churches, public schools, public utility structures, and agricultural structures like barns. Color schemes, no building would have more than 3 colors, no fluorescent or neon colors permitted. Exterior building materials, things like brick or stucco, wood or wood-like appearances, even a metal building if it's kind of constructed to have that wood-like appearance. Roof design, nothing specific about the roofs, but mechanical equipment would be screened from visibility from public right-of-way. Awnings will be a solid neutral color. Signs would be coordinated with building designs. Wall signs would be an integral part of the structure. Site furnishings like benches and bollards would be made of wood or wood-like materials. So again, this is where we are. This is sort of a general consensus, I believe. You'll have the more specific language in front of you as part of the code update, and I will answer any questions I can.
Before we get to the board, I'd like to ask the public, if you don't mind, Jeff. Do we have any written requests, Shani?
We do not.
Is there anyone in the public that'd like to speak to the board? Can you provide your written request and come to the front?
Oh, not a question, Bob, I just wanted to...
If you want to speak to the board, you have to come to the front.
Speak now?
You have to speak now, if you'd like to come to the board. If anyone has any additional forms, please submit them to Shani. Please state your name and address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, fellow commissioners, my name is Richard Creedon. I live at 1172 Apache Drive, Geneva, Florida, and I'm the Vice President of the Geneva Citizens Association. I will be even briefer than Jeff.
Okay.
We'd like to compliment the staff, especially Jeff Hopper and Mary Moskowitz, who are working very closely with the Geneva community to propose rural non-residential design standards that, although not everything that we would have desired, go a long way to encourage new commercial buildings that enhance the feel of ruralness that we are all working very hard to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public like to address the board? I'd like to close public input. Now we'll go to board questions and comments. Commissioner Zimbauer.
I have two questions or comments. First, I want to thank Mr. Creedon and the Geneva Association, as well as all those property owners out there. I had many of those commercial entities in my office that had concerns about somehow we were changing the setbacks and all that kind of stuff, which was in no way, shape, or form what this was about. And we've got their minds at ease, and staff has done that as well. We appreciate and thank you very much for working with both sides, and I think we've come a long way at arriving at a mutual acceptable place for these standards. So I just want to report that to my fellow commissioners. I do have a question on the compatibility on the parking garage. I waited for mine to go to the end of this session and not interrupt the presenters. So my question is...
Time for question and comments built into the presentation.
You want to be heard, Commissioner Lockhart?
Okay, can we just continue?
So my question on the compatibility on the parking garage issue is, who sets the tone for the compatibility? The first person who builds in a redevelopment area, or the second person, the last person? And how do we handle compatibility? Let's just take the 1792 CRA area. What does compatibility mean?
So it would really depend on the size of the project. If it's directly adjacent to another neighboring project, then it would need to be compatible with, I guess, a balance of whatever's proposed on the site and whatever's on the neighbor's property. In general, what we're looking for is that these parking structures have some architectural elements and are not just black boxes or blank boxes. That's really the intent, is to avoid that featureless parking structure that is in a public location, in a public-facing location. If it's shielded by other buildings, then it's not really an issue.
Yeah, understood. But my question is more, let's take a redevelopment area where there is rundown supermarket strip centers, there's old residential, and now it's slowly coming in to be redesigned and redeveloped. So I'm the first person who wants to build a parking garage, and next to me is a vacant supermarket strip center, and maybe on the other side of me is some old rundown residential that may be condemned at any moment. What do I got to be compatible with?
Sure. I mean, if it's a vacant area, then you would be setting the standard for compatibility, and as long as there's not a historic, the only situation in which there'd be a strong architectural thrust in this particular direction would be if there's a historic community, like what we saw, some of those images you saw were from downtown Winter Garden, where there's a very strong architectural character and you'd want to bring forward that character. I would anticipate that in most suburban redevelopment cases, that wouldn't be the case, and you're merely looking to, again, avoid that black box situation.
Sure, and my concern would be is that whole argument of now the next property has to mirror some kind of compatibility with the first one. Mm-hmm. Or how does this board say, well, historically, this is a agricultural area with agricultural amenities. We want everybody to have some kind of agricultural thing. Or maybe it is some population density and historic event in that community. So how do we do that? I'm just concerned about the argument of that developer and that builder who says, I got to be compatible. What is compatibility?
I think we can add language to make it more clear that its compatibility is only with the immediately adjacent buildings which are proposed, and if there's historic character in the existing condition.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Commissioner Herr.
I think that this was an interesting concept because my read of the documents were typically driven toward a parking garage that was associated with another development. So it was compatible with the surrounding development. So I think the question is a good one in terms of, at some point, somebody may just want to build a for-profit parking garage. And that is a little bit of a game changer. My general comments about all of this, and I said this in briefing, and I want to share it for the purposes of the board, is I'd like us to get away from language that, if possible, we encourage. I think language that says, if possible, we encourage, means that it ends up right here for a decision and a debate. And the idea should be, when possible, you will. And so in general, I think we need to move in that direction. And before they go and write it, that may be a worthy, just spend a minute or two on it.
Anything else, Commissioner?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Lockhart?
So to spend a minute or two, I think there's worthy input there. And I think we, in our desire to be flexible and understand that there are variations of gray, we probably do need to tighten that language up some, because we've found in other areas when we use that, to the extent practicable, sometimes suddenly someone determines it's not practicable, and so it doesn't get done at all. And I'm not just talking about in this arena, but in trees, yeah, whatever. So maybe we bring back some suggestions for what some of that language might look like to help us with that. I would concur. And then I have a question on the rural overlay.
This will be your time.
I'm glad to hear that the commercial property owners were included in the discussion, because it's really easy for folks who live in an area to want to put restrictions on property that isn't their own. And so the feedback from the actual property owners that this will be impacting is important to me, too. So is it your impression, Mr. Hopper, that the actual commercial property owners are on board and supportive of this language that's being presented today?
I can't say definitely yes or no to that, but I did notice as the meetings went on, I heard less and less of a pushback from that side of the room, sort of.
Is it because they gave up? Or is it because they really had their fears allayed?
My opinion is that they just, because the whole thrust of this was that we don't want to redo Chuliota. That was really a different time and a different purpose. This scenario was intended to be much more general, much less specific, much less restrictive. I think once everybody understood that, it was a lot less of a heavy lift.
Okay. And then one specific question about the bollards. And correct me if my impression of a bollard is being misapplied. But a bollard, in my mind, is something that's placed out in front of a door or a window that keeps a car from driving through. So how are we going to keep cars from driving through wood if the bollards can only be wood?
I think that's where you would see a sort of a wood-like appearance.
So it can be made of concrete but has to look like wood?
That may be something we want to talk about more.
Yeah. I think there are some, I understand the intent, and I'm not opposed to the intent of much of this, of what we're attempting to accomplish, but the devil's always in the details. And when we start micromanaging things to the extent of saying that a bollard has to be made out of wood or look like wood, I don't know, I'm curious if we've gone too far. That's my feedback on something like that. And some other, like 30 to 80% of the front doors have to be glass. Why? Why do we pick 30 to 80? Why not 20 to 90? Why not 40 to 60? I'd like to know where those specificities were derived from, so I can better understand why I should support the specificity.
Thank you, Commissioner Lockhart. Commissioner Constantine? No. Okay, I'm just going down the line.
I understand.
Okay. This is obviously coming back to us when we see the red line.
Yes, sir.
I think that's important. I think there's a lot of good comments here. And once we start seeing the red line, or the public starts seeing the red line or the crossouts, I'm sure there'll be even more questions.
I have no doubt.
There's no doubt in my mind. But I look forward to hearing from the public. I believe there's no action on this item.
That's correct.
Because it's just for informational purposes only. So if there's no other discussion, we'll move on. Thank you very much for staff. At this time, move on to the county attorney briefing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple things. I handed out over the last week or so a few memos on the COVID and ARPA work that staff has been doing is summarizes in kind of a nutshell version the money that has come in, the money that is being spent, and the criteria. I just thought County Manager's Office has done an amazing job over the last couple of years in providing incredible amount of detail, but we just wanted to provide a quick thumbnail overview, and that should be in your attorney opinion book. Yesterday, you should have received the comprehensive memo that was distributed, and we'll talk more about that later. And finally, I just want to mention something to you for a future discussion purpose, and that is, excuse me, that is, I've been working with Allison Thaw, and I know that Rebecca's done a great deal of work on this. But I've started drafting, with staff's help, a comprehensive memo on affordable housing. And we can call it whatever name you want, but this is going to be a follow-up on the presentation I did, it might be 2 years ago now, pieces of the puzzle, so to speak. And I'd like to talk to you and just have you start thinking about, the goal would be that myself along with staff would literally ask you to host, if you will, a 1 or 2 day seminar right here in this chamber involving community leaders, builders, interest groups, nonprofits, community groups, and we would have an assortment of panels of experts and community leaders throughout the day or 2 days to talk about affordable housing for Seminole County. I mean, we've seen a lot of reports about regional and national and state, and this is drawing upon my experience with housing and urban development. I used to run those around the country, and they were very well received by the community. And I just want you to think about that, but we hope to have a comprehensive report memo to you sometime in the near future. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you. County Manager, any comments? Okay. Any additional comments from the board? Commissioner Lockhart?
Well, I would just, to give feedback to what the county attorney just said, I think that would be a wonderful opportunity for us to take the lead in that discussion and to convene those different groups. I think it would be very appropriate for us to do that, so I would be supportive of that.
Thank you. Commissioner Zimbauer?
I'd like to know more about it. I agree that we have a great opportunity in Mr. Applegate's experience and so forth. We already have the AHAC here in the county, and we meet on a regular basis, not only with our local community partners, but also regional and statewide. So we should include those folks in that work product and discussion, because there's a lot of things that Allison's already aware of and her group is already aware of that are already in the pipeline of happening. So we all have a clear understanding. Then hopefully, we're going to have that on top of our community land trust part and parcel that you've already given those memos and so forth to incorporate those.
Thank you.
That's the whole idea, to bring in the partners.
All great ideas. Okay, at this time, we're going to recess. We'll reconvene at 1:30. Thank you.
All right.